And when God marks a moment in time, when God declares that a certain day carries a shift in the atmosphere, nothing in the seen or unseen realm can prevent that appointed blessing from breaking forth. There are days in life when heaven seems to lean closer, when the wind of God seems to blow with unusual strength, and when the heart suddenly awakens to the realization that generations are being rewritten through a single act of divine intervention. This is such a moment, not a moment built on your qualifications, your background, or the opinions of others. No. This is a moment forged by the will of God, established by the decree of God, and carried by the unstoppable hand of God. When God decides to lift a family, there is no bitterness deep enough, no debt heavy enough, no curse ancient enough to stand in the way. God does not negotiate with darkness. God overturns it. God does not apologize to history. God rewrites it. There are families who have lived under the weight of silence, financial silence, emotional silence, spiritual silence. Generations who learn to brace for struggle before they ever learn to dream. People who have been trained by hardship to expect less than the fullness of what God has prepared for them. But when God steps in, He speaks to the silent place. He speaks to the buried expectations. He speaks to the trembling hope that has not dared to rise. And when God speaks, even the dust of old disappointments begins to shift. The soul begins to remember that it was created by the one who both formed the universe and designed the destiny of every household. God does not leave a family in the same condition generation after generation. God is a restorer. God is a turner of tides. God is the one who commands seasons to change because His intentions cannot be resisted by earthly logic or generational patterns. When God begins rewriting a family's wealth story, He does not start with money. He starts with identity. He starts with the heart that has forgotten its dignity. He starts with the mind that has been shaped by scarcity. He starts with the internal dialogue that whispers, this is how it has always been. For God knows that before wealth can flow into your hands, it must first flow into your beliefs, your expectations, your self-understanding. God elevates from the inside out. And the moment God begins elevating your understanding of what is possible, you become a magnet for the resources that match your renewed identity. Wealth is not first a number. It is a mindset awakened by the breath of God. And understand this, when God targets a family for transformation, He does not merely bless individuals. He establishes a lineage of abundance. God thinks in generations. God sees beyond one lifetime. God looks down through your children, your grandchildren, and those not yet born. God sees the branches of your family tree reaching into a future where lack has no authority. What you have struggled through was not the end of your story. It was the soil in which God planted your turning point. God is not merely restoring what was lost. He is constructing what was never possessed. God is creating rooms in your family's future that no one in your bloodline imagined existed. Some families have carried stories of survival, stories of doing what they could with what little they had, stories of stretching resources until they felt like they might snap. But God is shifting your family from survival to establishment, from instability to strength, from barely making it to overflowing by divine appointment. When God writes, He never writes in small letters. When God restores, He never restores halfway. When God blesses, He blesses in a way that announces His sovereignty to every force that ever tried to hold you down. There are moments when God decides that the struggle has served its purpose. There comes a divine enough, the kind of enough that stops cycles in their tracks, the kind of enough that ends patterns and resets trajectories, the kind of enough that is spoken not from human frustration, but from divine authority. And when God declares enough, every chain recognizes its defeat. Every generational burden recognizes it has expired. Every limitation recognizes that it can no longer stand as part of your family's identity. God does not merely open doors. God breaks walls. God does not simply create opportunities. God creates testimonies so profound that even future generations will speak of His intervention. Your family's wealth story is not being rewritten because of chance. It is being rewritten because God has chosen to intervene. God has chosen to bring clarity where there was confusion. God has chosen to bring order where there was chaos. God has chosen to illuminate what was hidden and unlock what was sealed. God has chosen to call forth prosperity from places previously barren. And when God chooses, nothing can unchoose. When God purposes, nothing can repurpose. When God seals a blessing, no power can unseal it. God is releasing ideas that have been dormant in your lineage. Ideas that were meant to prosper generations but were never activated due to fear, lack of resources, or discouragement. God is awakening creativity that once flickered but was never fanned into flame. God is stirring innovation, strategy, and boldness. Wealth does not only come through inheritance. Wealth often emerges through the ideas God breathes into the minds of those willing to trust Him. God is the source of inspiration that changes families. God is the one who speaks concepts into the soul that become the foundations of future empires. And hear this well, God is raising someone in every family who becomes the turning point. Someone who breaks the silence. Someone who shatters the old narratives. Someone who says, this is not how our story ends. Someone who carries an anointing for elevation without arrogance, for abundance without corruption, for prosperity with purpose. You are rising not for selfish gain, but to become the pillar that supports generations. You are the answer to the prayers of those who came before you. You are the vessel God has chosen to usher your family into a new era. Even the struggles you have endured were not wasted. Every scarcity you battled taught you how to handle abundance with humility. Every delay trained you to appreciate the worth of what God is bestowing. Every setback prepared you to recognize the distinction between what comes from human effort and what comes from the hand of God. You are not entering this new chapter naive. You are entering it strengthened, sharpened, and spiritually equipped. God is not handing wealth to unprepared hearts. He is elevating those who have been refined through adversity. And in this season, God is aligning the right people around you. People who speak life, not doubt. People who can walk with you instead of pulling you backward. People who celebrate your rise because they understand the divine purpose behind it. God is cleansing your atmosphere, removing those who cannot journey with you into the next level. God is not being harsh. God is being protective. For there are blessings so weighty that they cannot be carried in atmospheres polluted by jealousy, disbelief, or sabotage. God is also dismantling the internal barriers you did not know were there. Hidden guilt that whispered you were unworthy of abundance. Unseen fear that told you blessings would slip away. Subtle grief from past failures that made you question whether your family story could truly change. God is uprooting every weed that grew from old pain. God is healing the emotional landscape of your bloodline so that wealth does not merely enter, it remains. God does not want blessings that arrive and vanish. God desires blessings that settle, multiply, and testify. Where others see numbers, God sees purpose. Where others see material possessions, God sees generational empowerment. God is not giving your family wealth to inflate ego. God is giving your family wealth to build stability, influence, legacy, and impact. God is raising a line of people who will use what they receive with integrity and intention. You will not be burdened by what comes. You will be strengthened by it. God is preparing you to handle the weight of prosperity without losing the grounding of humility. And remember this truth, God does not rush transformation, but God also does not delay without reason. Every season has been intentional. Every moment was a setup for something greater. What felt like stagnation was actually preparation. What felt like loss was pruning. What felt like waiting was positioning. God does not waste time. God invests time. And now that investment is maturing. Now the seeds planted in faith are breaking through the soil. Now the prayers whispered in exhaustion are echoing in the halls of heaven. Now the blessings that were held in reserve are being released at the appointed hour. You are standing at the cusp of a divine reversal. A reversal that looks nothing like the past. A reversal that redefines your family's image. A reversal that causes even those who knew your history to marvel at your transformation. God is not simply adding blessings. God is rewriting the narrative so completely that the old story cannot compete with the new. What once identified your family will no longer define it. The label of lack is being removed. The identity of struggle is being erased. The shadow of insufficiency is being scattered. God is painting a new picture, and it is filled with provision, expansion, and divine favor. And when God begins shifting the internal climate of a family, you will sense it long before you see it. You will feel a new boldness rising where there was once hesitation. You will feel an unfamiliar clarity settling where confusion once lived. You will feel a stirring, a quickening, a silent certainty whispering that something extraordinary is unfolding beneath the surface. This is the way God prepares the soil of a family, by awakening the inner landscape long before the physical world catches up. Those who perceive this shift understand that wealth is not only measured in resources, but in readiness. And God is making your family ready, ready to receive, ready to steward, ready to rise without fear and walk with purpose. There are families who have been marked by stories of limitation so long that they have forgotten the limitless nature of God. They have repeated the same financial patterns for so many generations that repeating those patterns feels normal. But God is disrupting the familiar. God is breaking the agreements your ancestors unknowingly made with scarcity. God is silencing the echoes of not enough that lingered in the walls of your household. When God disrupts a cycle, He does not ask permission from the past. He overrides it with a higher decree. God is not consulting your family's previous experiences. God is consulting His own intention. And in this new intention, God is lifting the ceiling that has hovered over your family for decades. That invisible barrier that made every breakthrough feel temporary. That unseen limit that whispered, "This is as far as you can go." God is tearing that ceiling apart. God is replacing ceilings with open skies. God is transforming limits into launching pads. You will not rise a little. You will rise abundantly, because God does not perform shallow works. When God changes the trajectory of a family, He does so in a way that makes it impossible to attribute the transformation to anything but divine intervention. There are individuals within every family who have carried the silent weight of being the one expected to hold everything together. The one who sacrificed dreams for survival. The one who carried burdens because no one else could. The one who kept hope alive even when resources were low. But God is declaring that you will not only carry responsibility, you will carry reward. The strength you learned through hardship will now become the foundation upon which God builds prosperity. God is not overlooking your labor. God is not ignoring your tears. God is converting your endurance into elevation. You will rise not in spite of what you endured, but because of how faithfully you endured it. This is the hour when God is restoring honor to families who have been overlooked, households that were underestimated because their beginnings were humble, names that were spoken with pity instead of respect, people who were dismissed because they did not possess what society deemed valuable. But God does not measure value by visible assets. God measures value by purpose, and God has selected your family for a divine elevation that no one saw coming. God is lifting your household from the realm of obscurity into the realm of influence. Not for vanity, but for testimony. Not for show, but for impact. As God rewrites your family's wealth story, He is also rewriting the emotional memory attached to money. For some, money has always been associated with stress, fear, embarrassment, or tension. Every conversation about finances came with a sigh, a heaviness, or a sense of dread. But God is redefining the emotional meaning of provision. God is shifting money from a source of anxiety to a tool of empowerment. God is turning finances into a channel of peace rather than conflict. What once caused division will now cause unity. What once felt like pressure will now feel like purpose. God is transforming the very atmosphere around the concept of wealth in your family. And understand this: when God introduces new blessings, He simultaneously strengthens the character needed to sustain them. God is increasing your family's discipline, sharpening your family's wisdom, and deepening your family's humility. These inner qualities are not small things. They are the pillars that ensure prosperity does not become a trap. God is preparing your household to handle abundance with integrity. God is shaping hearts that can rise without becoming prideful, hearts that can influence without becoming oppressive, hearts that can receive without becoming entitled. God will not allow the blessing to become a burden. That is why the preparation is as divine as the provision. There are people watching your journey who will try to explain your rise through logic. They will say you were in the right place at the right time, or that you met the right people, or that you simply worked hard. But those explanations will fall apart because your elevation will exceed every logical boundary. What God is doing will not look like coincidence. It will look like orchestration. The timing, the connections, the opportunities, everything will align so precisely that it will be clear that God's hand was involved from beginning to end. Those who study your story will find God's fingerprints on every chapter. And listen carefully, God is activating courage in your lineage. Courage to step into spaces your family has never entered. Courage to make decisions your ancestors never had the chance to consider. Courage to take risks that align with divine instruction rather than human fear. Courage to believe that you are not an exception to God's abundance. You are the recipient of God's intention. When courage rises, complacency breaks. When courage rises, self-doubt loses its grip. When courage rises, the spirit becomes aligned with the future God has declared. God is also bringing order to areas that have been in disarray for too long. Financial habits that hindered progress, emotional wounds that sabotage stability, disorganized systems that made growth difficult. God is not only blessing, God is restructuring. God is replacing old habits with new disciplines. God is turning confusion into clarity. God is aligning your family with strategies that generate long-term expansion. This is not chaos, this is construction. God is building a foundation that can hold the weight of what is coming. There are blessings that have been stored up, waiting for the moment when your family would be ready to receive them. Not because God was withholding, but because God was preparing. And now the preparation is meeting the appointed time. The seeds planted by your ancestors, seeds of faith, seeds of sacrifice, seeds of resilience, are breaking open in this generation. You are standing in the harvest of prayers you did not even pray. God heard them, God remembered them, and now God is fulfilling them. You will see opportunities come to you that generations before you never imagined. Doors that were closed to your lineage will open with ease. Paths that were inaccessible will become clear. God is bringing your family into a realm of possibility where limitations no longer dictate destiny. The story is being rewritten so completely that when future generations look back, they will say, this is where everything changed. This is where God intervened. This is where the old story ended and the new story began. And when God begins enlarging a family's vision, it always comes with a holy dissatisfaction, an internal stirring that makes you realize you can no longer live according to the boundaries that once defined you. You begin to sense that what was acceptable for past generations is no longer acceptable for the future God is creating. You feel a pull, a stretch, a divine tension calling you out of the familiar and into the extraordinary. This is not ambition born of ego, it is awakening born of God. It is the realization that you were never meant to simply repeat the story you inherited. You were meant to elevate it. You were meant to carry your lineage into the fullness of what God intended from the beginning. When God rewrites a family's wealth story, He also rewrites their internal language. The words spoken over the household begin to shift. Old declarations of defeat begin to crumble. Conversations that once centered on impossibility begin to center on opportunity. Where there was fear, God inserts boldness. Where there was doubt, God inserts clarity. Where there was limitation, God inserts revelation. Families rise or fall based on the language they speak over themselves. And God is converting the language of your household into a vocabulary of expectation. You will speak differently. You will think differently. You will plan differently because God has infused your speech with the power of promise. God is also breaking the spirit of financial shame that has shadowed your family for too long. Shame that made you hide your struggles. Shame that made you pretend to be okay when you were breaking inside. Shame that made you avoid dreams because you were afraid of being laughed at or misunderstood. But God is declaring that shame has no place in the story He is writing. The new wealth that God is bringing is not laced with embarrassment. It is wrapped in dignity. It is rooted in purpose. It is established in honor. God is lifting your family out of the shadows and placing you in a position where you can walk with your head high, knowing that every blessing came from the hand of the Almighty. And understand this deeply: when God elevates a family, He elevates their mindset before their status. You will begin to see yourself differently. You will no longer identify with the struggles that once defined you. God is giving you a new internal identity. Stable, strong, capable, worthy, and destined. This shift is not arrogance, it is alignment. You are aligning with how God has always seen you. You are stepping into the truth of your divine design. And once identity changes, everything else follows. The world responds to how God has trained your inner posture. God is also establishing new financial roots in your lineage. Roots that cannot be easily uprooted by crisis, economy, or opposition. These roots are not material. They are spiritual. They are formed through wisdom, discipline, discernment, and obedience. They are planted in the soil of trust. Trust that God is the source. God is the provider. God is the sustainer. When wealth is rooted in God, it becomes unshakable. It becomes generational. It becomes the kind of blessing that outlasts market shifts, unexpected trials, or temporary disruptions. God is giving your family wealth with roots, not wealth that withers. There are hidden strengths inside your family that were never activated because previous generations did not have the environment, mentorship, or opportunity to cultivate them. But God is creating space for those dormant strengths to awaken. There are gifts in your bloodline. Entrepreneurial gifts, creative gifts, leadership gifts, organizational gifts that are being stirred right now. These gifts were placed in your lineage by divine intention. They are part of the blueprint God designed for your family's rise. God is shining light on what once sat unused, unrecognized, or underestimated. Do not be surprised when you see younger members of your family rising with boldness that seems beyond their years. Do not be surprised when new ideas flow effortlessly, when new opportunities appear unexpectedly, when new paths open suddenly. This is the evidence that God is POS, positioning your family for generational influence. You are witnessing the early signs of a divine transition. Old limitations fading, new potentials emerging, the atmosphere around your household shifting with every passing day. God is not preparing just one person. God is preparing an entire lineage. And hear this with spiritual clarity. Wealth is not simply the accumulation of resources. It is the power to shape outcomes. It is the ability to influence environments, stabilize households, and create opportunities for those connected to your name. Wealth brings weight, moral weight, spiritual weight, generational weight. God is giving your family the kind of wealth that makes an impact beyond personal comfort. You will not only be blessed, you will become a distributor of blessing. You will become a source of stability for others. You will become the answer to prayers whispered by those who never had enough. God is also dealing with every hidden fear that once sabotaged your progress. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of loss, fear of not being capable, fear of exceeding the story your family once lived in. These fears do not come from God. They are the residue of old battles, and God is burning that residue out of your spirit. You will not enter this new chapter with trembling. You will enter with confidence rooted in God's faithfulness. When God leads, fear becomes powerless. When God directs, doubt loses its voice. When God empowers, courage becomes natural. Some of the battles your family fought were never meant to break you. They were meant to prepare you. They were meant to sharpen discernment, deepen compassion, and create wisdom that money alone could never purchase. God does not waste pain. God uses it as material for elevation. Every hardship preserved a lesson, and every lesson preserved a blessing. Now you are stepping into a season where the lessons of He past will become the tools of the future. Your family is coming into a time where your previous struggles will become your greatest advantages because you now carry understanding others lack. And God is aligning time with destiny. Timing matters. There are blessings that would have been wasted if they had come too early. There are opportunities that would have been overwhelming if they had come before the internal foundation was built. But now the timing is perfect. Your spirit is maturing. Your mind is expanding. Your vision is clearing. Your household is stabilizing. Everything is converging toward the moment God ordained. A moment when preparation meets provision, when purpose meets opportunity, when promise meets manifestation. God is also uniting your family in ways that previous generations did not experience. Where there was division, God is bringing understanding. Where there was tension, God is bringing peace. Where there was silence, God is bringing communication. Wealth is not only about money, it is about unity. A divided family cannot sustain abundance, but God is healing the fractures. God is restoring the bonds. God is building a foundation of unity strong enough to hold the blessings He's about to pour out. You will see old misunderstandings dissolve. You will see long-standing conflicts lose power. You will witness hearts soften, perspective shift, and wounds heal. This is not coincidence. This is divine alignment. God knows that prosperity rests best where harmony thrives. God is preparing your family emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and relationally for what is coming. The blessing will not just be received, it will be protected. And there is something profound taking place in your lineage. Right now, God is turning your family into a testimony, a living testament of what happens when God intervenes, a visible demonstration of what happens where. And God decides to overturn cycles and establish new beginnings. Your household will become a story that inspires others, a reminder that no family is too broken, too limited, too overlooked, or too burdened for God to transform. What God is doing in your family will spark faith in others. People will point to your story and say, if God did it for them, then surely God can do it for us. And now, as this moment settles into your spirit, let every word become a summons, an undeniable call from God to rise into the fullness of your purpose. For what good is a rewritten story if you do not step into it? What good is a divine shift if you continue living as though nothing has changed? God has spoken over your family, but now you must speak over yourself. God has prepared the path, but now you must walk with courage. God has opened the atmosphere, but now you must breathe differently, think differently, act differently. This is the hour when complacency must bow and conviction must rise. This is the time when excuses lose their power and responsibility takes its rightful place. God is urging you to awaken, to become fully present in your destiny, to shake off the weight of timidity and embrace the future He has ordained. You must examine your life with honesty. You must ask yourself whether you have been living according to the limitations of the past or the possibilities of God. Look at the habits you tolerate, the beliefs you carry, the fears you nurse, and ask whether they reflect the God who is rewriting your family story. Look at the patterns you repeat, not with shame, but with clarity, and determine whether they belong in the season God is preparing. You cannot carry old mindsets into new blessings. You cannot walk into abundance with the language of scarcity. You cannot step into divine elevation while clinging to the comfort of what was. God is calling you to confront the parts of yourself that have settled, the parts that have shrunk in the face of adversity, the parts that forgot their divine origin. This is not condemnation, it is invitation. An invitation to grow, an invitation to rise, an invitation to align with the magnitude of God's intention. Draw closer to God in this season, not casually, not occasionally, not as a last resort, but with intention and hunger. Seek clarity from God before you seek approval from people. Seek wisdom from God before you seek shortcuts from the world. Seek direction from God before you make decisions rooted in fear or haste. Let your heart become sensitive to God's guidance so that every step you take is backed by divine certainty. Walk with the awareness that God is not distant, God is near, God is not silent, God is speaking, God is not passive, God is working. Draw near with a posture of surrender, because surrender is the doorway to transformation. When you surrender, you stop fighting battles that belong to God. When you surrender, you stop resisting the growth He is pulling you toward. When you surrender, you allow God to shape you into the vessel capable of carrying generational blessing. Let your purpose be renewed. Do not drift through life as though you were created without intention. God formed you with precision, and your purpose is not accidental, it is divine. There is something God placed within you that the world has not yet seen. There is a strength you have not yet tapped into, a wisdom you have not yet expressed, a vision you have not yet activated. Purpose is not found in comfort, it is found in obedience. Purpose is not discovered in silence, it is discovered in communion with God. Ask God to reignite what has dimmed. Ask God to awaken what has slept. Ask God to remind you who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. For when purpose awakens, stagnation dies. When purpose awakens, fear loses its authority. When purpose awakens, destiny becomes inevitable. And as you move forward, let your steps be bold. Let your decisions be anchored in faith. Let your voice carry the conviction of someone who knows God is rewriting their family's legacy. Do not shrink to make others comfortable. Do not apologize for the blessings God is releasing. Do not hide the light God placed within you to avoid being misunderstood. Walk with certainty. Walk with dignity. Walk with the awareness that God is guiding you, shaping you, empowering you to become the breakthrough your family has waited for. Your life is not small. Your impact is not accidental. Your rise is not random. God has placed you at the center of a divine transition, and your obedience will shape the future of generations yet unborn. So step forward with a renewed heart. Step forward with clean intention. Step forward with a spirit that trusts God more than circumstances, God more than history, God more than fear. Let your final words to yourself in this moment be words of commitment, that you will no longer live beneath the level of calling God has placed on your life, that you will embrace growth over comfort, purpose over passivity. Why? And obedience over hesitation. Let this be the day you decide that your family's transformation will not stop with God's promise. It will continue through your choices. Rise with the strength of someone appointed, not someone surviving. Rise with the awareness that God is your source, your guide, your foundation, and your future. And as you rise, remember this truth. When a life is surrendered to God, it becomes a conduit of generational blessing. When a heart aligns with God, it becomes a lighthouse for those who follow. When a person walks in purpose empowered by God, they become the turning point of an entire lineage. You are that turning point. You are that vessel. You are that testimony. Walk forward now, fearless, focused and fortified, knowing that God is with you, God is guiding you, and God is preparing a future for your family that will echo with abundance, purpose, and unshakable divine favor.